Ruminants, monogastric animals, hindgut fermenters, all of those are terms that we use a lot here on the Kummer Homestead channel as well as on my main health and fitness channel. And my editor and wife told me the other day, well, maybe not everyone knows what those terms mean and what the implications are, both from an animal management, from an animal health, and from a human health perspective when we eat the products of those animals, like the meat or the eggs, etc. So I thought, well, maybe let's do a video and walk through the differences between ruminants, monogastric animals, and hindgut fermenters. And let's start with the ruminants, which I think are the best type of animals, if you will. And what ruminants basically means is they have a rumen. They have multiple stomachs, including a rumen, which is a big fermentation chamber that allows the animal to consume grass and ferment it to not only extract a lot of nutrients, but to also create vitamins like B12 and others that the animal, doesn't necessarily get from the food it consumes, but they are made in the rumen. And it also allows the animal to rearrange fatty acids and amino acids to turn less than ideal forage into high quality protein like muscle meat, beef in the example. And so those are ruminants or ruminant animals, animals with a rumen with multiple stomachs that allow them to digest plant matter very efficiently. On the other end of the spectrum are monogastric animals, those animals that only have one stomach, and humans are also monogastric animals. We only have one stomach. And the implication of that is that we cannot ferment plant matter. We do not well with consuming only plants. Not to dump on vegans again, but we are not meant to be consuming grass and plant matter predominantly. Now, we can also digest it partially to varying degrees, but it's not supposed to be the main source of nutrients and energy for monogastric animals. And what are monogastric animals? Like, for example, chickens are monogastric animals, pigs are monogastric animals, all poultry basically are monogastric animals. Maybe, just to clarify, what are ruminants, because I didn't mention it before, even though I think it's most of you know, especially in the homesteading world. Cows, sheep, goats, camels, all of those are deer. If you talk about wild game, all of those are ruminant animals. They have a rumen to ferment. Monogastric animals, chickens, geese, turkeys, etc. They have one stomach, and that means it's much more the quality of the feed that they get is significantly more important because they do not have the capacity to rearrange fatty acids, to rearrange amino acids, to make vitamins and minerals. I mean, there are exceptions to that, but for the most part, they are significantly less capable of turning less than ideal forage into high quality protein and into, health overall. So that means from raising an animal perspective, it's very important what you feed your chickens and your pigs, because that directly impacts their health and the quality of the meat that then you consume. And that's one of the reasons why we feed the highest quality feed possible to our chickens, in addition to letting them free range and, find whatever they need to. But we use low PUFA, meaning feed that is low in polyunsaturated fatty acids. Those are long chain fatty acids that are very relatively unstable, that can oxidize quickly. Those molecular bonds can break easily, and when that happens, they oxidize, as it's called, or become rancid, and that makes them inflammatory. And so that's why a high PUFA diet, a diet that's high in polyunsaturated fatty acids. And where are those PUFAs? Well, in all the grains. In most plants are high in PUFAs. Animal protein or animal fats, relatively speaking, are high in saturated fats, maybe monounsaturated fats, but relatively low in PUFAs. And so that's why we try to feed our chickens and our monogastric animals overall a feed that's low in PUFAs and that's as high quality as possible, because that directly translates into the health of the animal and in the health of the meat that we then ultimately consume, or the eggs in the case of chickens, right? So those are monogastric animals. And again, as I said before, humans are monogastric animals as well. We are what we eat. If the diet we consume is shitty, our health is going to be shitty. There's a direct correlation between those two, a direct causation, really, not just a correlation. And then the third category, they are somewhat special. They are called hindgut fermenters. And rabbits would fall into the category, and if I'm not mistaken, horses as well. And what that means is they don't have a rumen, but what they do is they consume the feed then it goes through the digestive tract, they poop it out, and then they immediately eat that first passing, that stool or the pellets in the case of rabbits, that passed for the first time. They immediately consume it again to extract even more nutrients before it goes then through the digestive system again, and the hard pebbles come out, and those are the ones that are manure, that they don't eat again. So rabbits kind of try to compensate for a lack of rumen. They have a kind of small-ish fermentation chamber, but not a rumen, full-fledged rumen. And because that chamber does such a poor job, relatively speaking, at extracting micronutrients, they eat their poop again to extract even more, so they get the nutrients that they need from the feed they consume. And so, again, rabbits, somewhere in between the ruminants and the monogastric animals, there's a little bit, I guess, more leeway with less than ideal feed, or less if it's poorer quality feed with rabbits. But with monogastric animals, that's where you really have to pay attention to feed high quality feed. That's where you typically, your costs are greater in the context of raising animals, because very often for poultry, and in many cases even for pigs, you have to import feed because you might not be growing enough. With a ruminant, all you need is sunshine, rain, and pasture. So as long as you have sunshine and rain, chances are there's green stuff growing, the ruminants can consume that, and you're good. You don't need to be importing much. Maybe some hay in winter, depending on various factors, but overall, ruminants are easy. They improve soil quality. They are sustainable. If you're a self-reliant homesteader, maybe, all of this speaks for ruminants, and they also have the capacity to turn, even if the feed is less than ideal, into high-quality protein. So even if you feed a cow grain, which is absolutely horrible because it changes the acidity of the rumen, and that can lead then to bacteria become acid resistant. And so when those bacteria then are in the rumen and ultimately in the meat, and humans consume that, then they survive the relatively acidic stomach of humans, and we get sick. So that's one of the reasons, all the E. coli and all of that stuff that you hear from, that you might get from meat, you get that from grain-fed animals, not from 100% pasture-raised animals. But that's a side note. But the bottom line here is ruminants are my favorite type of meat, of animal really, and of meat for food for us to consume, because they are easy, and you cannot possibly turn their meat into something that's terrible for human health. With chickens, with monogastric animals, generally speaking, it's the exact opposite. Most of the meat that you buy in the store, and even that most homesteaders raise, I would argue, is not great. It's high in PUFAs, those polyunsaturated fatty acids. It's just not something that I would want to consume on a regular basis, because the animals get a less than ideal feed. That means less than ideal meat quality, high in less than ideal fatty acid composition, low in micronutrients. I don't want to eat that because that makes me then sick. You can see the circle here. Not a great thing. So with monogastric animals, you really have to be on top of the game. Make sure the feed is top notch. Make sure they're pasteurized. Make sure they really get the diet that they are supposed to. Chickens are omnivores. They're insectivores, really. So they are not. If you see a vegetarian fat hens, that means they are fed a shitty diet, because hens are not vegetarian. Chickens are not vegetarian. So very difficult to get the diet right. You can do it, obviously, and we try to do it here on the homestead, but it's much more difficult. With hindgut fermenters, somewhere in between. One of the reasons we raise rabbits, because we don't have the space right now here for ruminants, but with those we get the red meat, and in a somewhat similar manner we can raise them appropriately, producing high quality meat without relying on a lot of import, especially not imports in the form of grain. So I hope that clears it up a little bit, the difference between ruminants, monogastric animals, hindgut fermenters. Whenever I use those terms on the blog or here on the YouTube channel, you know what it means. And I'll try to explain it whenever I do a video, and try to avoid words that not everyone might be familiar with, but at least now we have a video that I can refer to. So if you're interested, check it out and let me know. Did you know the difference between ruminants, hindgut fermenters, and monogastric animals? Let me know in the comments. I'd like to get a sense of, if that was something that everyone knows anyway, and I just made this video for nothing, or if it was something that, you felt like, okay, now I kind of better understand what it means, and more specifically, the health implications on the animals as well as on our human health, because ultimately we homestead to stay healthy. That's the main reason we do it. And so we want to make sure the food we produce is as healthy as it can possibly be. With that, see you in the next video. Like and subscribe. Send it to someone who might not know the difference, but who should. Until next time.